Imagine headlines erupting across the globe, a sitting U.S. president, wielding the extraordinary power to forgive federal crimes, steps into the most controversial celebrity trial of the century. The question stops millions in their tracks. Could Donald Trump actually pardon Sean Diddy Combs if he's convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering? And what would happen if he did? Just days after famously pardoning reality stars Todd and Julie Chrisley, and even rapper NBA YoungBoy, Trump stunned the press with a single statement. When pushed about the swirling rumors around the Diddy case, he revealed, "I would certainly look at the facts if I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me. It wouldn't have any impact on me." Trump says he's watching. He knows everyone else is watching too. And the stakes? They're nothing short of historic, for the justice system, celebrity culture, and the very notion of presidential power. But how did we even get here? How can one individual in the White House with a single signature wipe out the consequences of even the gravest federal crimes? And why is this particular case, combining music, money, power, and public outrage, producing such a seismic shockwave throughout law, politics, and society? Let's rewind, because to understand the Diddy pardon debate, you first need a crash course in the origins and evolution of presidential pardons. The power of the presidential pardon is written right into Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. He shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Sounds simple. But within those 30 words lies centuries of debate, controversy, and, some would say, genius-level loophole engineering. The Founding Fathers, looking at the English monarchy, wanted the president to have a tool to correct injustices or show mercy. Alexander Hamilton even called the pardon an act of grace. Early examples were rare and restrained, but as America boomed and the federal government grew, so did the cases where the president's pen could change a life or change the headlines overnight. Fast forward to modern times. The list of controversial pardons has only grown. Richard Nixon, pardoned by Gerald Ford after Watergate. Mark Rich, pardoned by Bill Clinton after a fugitive tax scandal. Scooter Libby, Joe Arpaio, Michael Flynn, names forever linked to presidents who decided justice, or mercy, should take a different course. But here's the twist. There are almost no legal restrictions. The president's pardon power is breathtakingly broad. It covers any federal offense, from tax fraud to murder, for anyone, at any stage of the process. Convicted, indicted, or not even charged yet. The only absolute limit? Impeachment cases. That means the president could, if he wanted, preemptively pardon someone before trial, or even before indictment. The only real check is political pressure, public opinion, and the ever-watchful media. So how does the Diddy case fit in? Sean Diddy Combs isn't just a producer, rapper, and entrepreneur. He's an icon shaped by money, power, and relentless drive. Once a Trump party regular, he's now entangled in a sweeping criminal investigation that's gripping the entertainment world and the courts in equal measure. The charges? Racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution, the gravest accusations in the federal playbook. Just this past May, the pressure ratcheted up even higher. A new lawsuit appeared, filed by Jane Doe 4, reviving allegations of sexual assault and battery all the way back to 2003. Former assistants like Mia have now testified to a toxic work environment and what they call a pattern of abuse. Deontay Nash's chilling account corroborated threats and intimidation. Even Cassie, Diddy's former partner, broke down on the stand, her testimony echoing a larger pattern that prosecutors say is central to their case. Police didn't just find damning stories. They reportedly discovered drugs and over 1,000 bottles of baby oil during a raid at Diddy's Los Angeles mansion, details that stunned even seasoned investigators. Meanwhile, the prosecution is weaving a narrative that Diddy's business empire wasn't just about music. It was a shield, a front, and a funnel for hiding criminal activities. And the ripple effects haven't stopped. Kid Cudi, another artist once close to Combs, described on the witness stand a Molotov cocktail attack, an act straight from a crime thriller. The legal community is in overdrive. Some say this case could set new precedent. Cassie's raw, emotional testimony has, according to some experts, bolstered the racketeering charges, strengthening the prosecution's case. Diddy, for his part, has rejected any plea deal. He insists on his innocence and on fighting the charges head-on. But here's where it gets even wilder. As the legal pyrotechnics build, the political fireworks ignite. Trump, never far from the spotlight, hints at the possibility of a pardon. Not out of friendship, he bluntly told reporters that their relationship soured after he entered politics. But as Trump says, I would certainly look at the facts if I think somebody was mistreated. Is it about justice or politics? Some analysts believe a high-profile pardon could win Trump points with hip-hop fans, the celebrity elite, or communities who feel targeted by the justice system. Others are horrified at the prospect, calling it a naked abuse of presidential power. Harry Sisson, a prominent political influencer, reacted with disbelief. What message does this send about accountability? But Trump is no stranger to controversy. His pardons have already made headlines. Just this week, he pardoned the Chrysleys, reality TV stars convicted of bank fraud. He comforted their children live on air, telling them, "This should not have happened." He pardoned NBA YoungBoy on gun charges, and he's never shied away from flexing political muscle when the world is watching. Yet the Diddy case is something else entirely. The allegations are not just financial crimes, but dark, disturbing claims of abuse, exploitation, and manipulation of power in the world of celebrity and music. Legal scholars are split. Brian Kalt, a law professor, summed up the legal ambiguity. Trump might consider a pardon. There's almost nothing to stop him. Celebrity culture itself has become part of the legal and political battlefield. Suge Knight, no stranger to controversy, predicted with confidence, "Combs will be all right. He's got friends in government." So, what does all of this mean for the limits of presidential power and for the future of accountability when fame, politics, and justice collide? If Trump intervenes with a pardon after a conviction, or even preemptively, experts believe the result would be an unprecedented storm. Some argue the courts could challenge a preemptive pardon, asking whether it can immunize someone from potential future prosecutions. Others warn it could trigger a crisis of confidence in the justice system, as millions question whether the elite are playing by different rules. And what about the broader implications? Would such a pardon inspire more celebrities and insiders to seek political cover when investigations close in? Would it further polarize a country already divided over issues of justice, privilege, and presidential power? With legal proceedings moving rapidly, testimony stacking up, and the media feeding a 24/7 cycle of rumor and speculation, the stage is set for a clash unlike anything we've seen before. Here's the question everyone's afraid to ask. If Trump pardons Diddy, what happens next? Would it force a constitutional showdown, unleash protests, or even reshape America's understanding of justice itself? There's more at stake than one man or one case. The future of presidential pardons, the credibility of the legal system, and the very definition of fairness in America hang in the balance. What no one can predict is just how far this storm will spread, or who could be swept up next. Now let's look ahead. If Trump actually followed through and granted Diddy a pardon, what would come next? The answer isn't just about one man walking free. It would send shockwaves through the legal, political, and social fabric of the United States, and possibly beyond. First, from a purely legal perspective, the presidential pardon is an extraordinary power. As seen throughout history, it can instantly erase federal convictions, commute sentences, and even be issued before a person is found guilty. But in this case, the stakes are unprecedented. Let's imagine Trump, perhaps in the heat of a campaign or at the outset of a new term, announces a pardon for Diddy. Cameras flash, hashtags explode, and the country splits into two camps: those outraged by what they see as a blatant abuse of power, and those who feel justice has been served or that the legal process was tainted from the start. Legal experts would dissect every word of Trump's explanation. Would he cite due process violations, a belief in Diddy's innocence, or simply assert his prerogative as president? Brian Kalt, a law professor quoted earlier, notes, "The scope of the pardon power is nearly limitless, but the political fallout has real consequences." Even before the ink is dry, opponents would likely file lawsuits, challenging the legitimacy of a preemptive pardon or alleging obstruction of justice. But the courts have historically given the president wide latitude. Only impeachment or public pressure could curb this authority, but neither has successfully reversed a pardon in modern history. Think of the political firestorm. Trump's opponents would seize on the move, painting it as proof of corruption or cronyism, particularly given Diddy's celebrity status and the severity of the charges. Supporters, on the other hand, might echo Trump's own claim: "If someone is mistreated, I'll look at the facts, no matter who they are." The media would have a field day. Editorial headlines, late-night monologues, op-eds from legal scholars and celebrities. Social media would supercharge the debate, possibly fragmenting into volatile subcultures, one demanding stricter accountability, the other railing against perceived witch hunts and government overreach. But the ripple effects wouldn't stop there. For the justice system, a pardon in such a high-profile, deeply controversial case could undermine confidence in criminal prosecutions, particularly those involving powerful figures. Would prosecutors hesitate to bring charges against major celebrities, fearing political interference? Or would it embolden those who see the courts as a battleground for political vendettas? And imagine the precedent. Future presidents, regardless of party, might feel even freer to wield the pardon power for political gain, rewarding loyalists or settling scores. Harry Sisson, a political influencer, warned, "If we normalize this kind of pardon, where is the line?" Meanwhile, for survivors and advocates against abuse, the message could be devastating. What would it say to victims if a president can wipe away federal charges after damning testimony from individuals like Cassie, Mia, and others? Groups fighting for justice and accountability would likely organize protests, demanding reforms to limit the pardon power. On the other side, Diddy's supporters, or those skeptical of federal prosecutions, might celebrate the move as a vindication, especially if they believe the charges were exaggerated or politically motivated. Suge Knight, a controversial figure in his own right, predicted, "He's going to be all right. He knows people, real people." Internationally, the world would watch closely. Leaders in countries struggling with their own justice systems might point to this case, either as an example of U.S. hypocrisy or as a demonstration of American executive strength. The global discussion around celebrity, power, and accountability might never be the same. But let's pull back from the headlines and ask, what practical lessons does this saga offer ordinary people like us? First, it reminds us that the law, while powerful, is not always as impartial or untouchable as we'd hope. Political figures, especially presidents, have levers of power most of us can hardly imagine. The pardon power is one such lever. Rooted in the Constitution, it can override years of investigation, testimony, and legal argument. Second, the case spotlights how interconnected politics, celebrity, and justice have become. The lines between legal process and entertainment blur more each year, especially with social media amplifying public reaction in real time. Even if you're not following the Diddy case closely, you've probably still seen the headlines, the memes, the outrage, and that's by design. Our attention, our conversation, shapes how history is written. So how can you use this insight? For one, recognize that the stories dominating our feeds, whether about celebrities, politicians, or activists, often have deeper roots and broader implications than we first realize. Don't just skim the headlines. Dig into the sources, understand the history, and ask who benefits from the narrative being promoted. If you find yourself frustrated by what seems like legal double standards, channel that energy. Support organizations working for criminal justice reform, campaign for clearer limits on presidential authority, or simply educate others about how power operates in our system. And when you vote or discuss politics with friends, remember cases like this. They're not isolated incidents. They hint at the bigger questions facing our country. Who gets to decide what justice means? How much unchecked power should any one person have? Now let's return to the central question. If Trump pardoned Diddy, what would actually happen next? Legally, Diddy would walk free from all federal charges tied to the pardon. But the storm wouldn't end there. State charges, if any, could still proceed. Civil lawsuits, like those filed by Jane Doe 4 and others, would continue, possibly with fresh momentum as new details emerged. Public opinion would be sharply divided, and protests could erupt in major cities, mirroring or even surpassing the fallout from past contentious pardons. In Congress, calls for reform might intensify. Some lawmakers would undoubtedly introduce proposals to restrict or clarify the pardon power, perhaps requiring oversight or carving out exceptions for certain crimes. But amending the Constitution, or even passing new federal laws, is a steep climb in today's divided climate. And for Trump himself, the decision could shape his legacy, either as a crusader against overreach or as a president who prioritized celebrity and connections over accountability. The impact would echo in campaign ads, debates, and think pieces for years to come. For Diddy, the story wouldn't de-escalate. He'd be both vindicated and tarnished, depending on whom you ask. The shadow of the accusations would linger, and civil suits could drain his resources and reputation further. His future in entertainment, fashion, and business would be uncertain at best. But set against this chaotic backdrop is a reminder about the fragility of justice and the complexities of redemption. Cassie's voice, alongside others who bravely testified, would not be silenced by a presidential signature. In fact, their stories might inspire a new wave of activism, journalism, and legal advocacy, ensuring that even if one chapter closes, the broader movement for accountability rolls on. And now, for a secret fact. Did you know that in over 2 centuries of American history, no president has ever had a federal pardon overturned by a court? That's right. Even the most controversial pardons have stood the test of time, thanks to the Constitution's broad language. Yet every time a president wields this power, it reignites fierce debate about where the limits should be and whether we as a society are comfortable with one person holding the ultimate veto over justice. So, as you reflect on the possibility of a Trump-Diddy pardon, ask yourself, is the presidential pardon a necessary check on government overreach or an outdated relic that's become a tool for the powerful to protect their own? We want to hear your thoughts. Would you support or oppose a pardon in this case, and why? Do you think the presidential pardon power needs to change? Drop a comment below with your opinion. And if you found this deep dive eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another episode.